Hey, welcome back to Rust Order Garage. We are back on the 56 half-ton pickup. Next thing that's going to be done, starting on the frame, front suspension. So with the original front suspension removed, I just rolled the Jag under the frame just to see what we're looking at here. And I'll have to do some work before we can even mock this up. First off, here's my marks on the frame. This is factory wheelbase. This is 1.5 inches forward, I believe that is. And lining the Jag front suspension up here, the center line of the Jag is pretty much with this rear control arm, upper control arm bolt, so I can line that up and get an idea where things are going to sit right now. And you can see the factory front cross member is not going to be able to stay. It's right under it. But rather than just remove it completely, I think I'm going to cut most of it out and leave the front section of it just as a support for the frame to keep anything from moving. I bolted a spreader bar in the front as well because I thought I might cut that out completely, but it's not like I'm going to save it. I don't think anybody's going to want it. So I think I'll cut most of it away, but leave the front section there just to give room for the Jag to get mocked up. The other thing is these frame rails are a little wide. You can see here I have my upper control arm is just touching the frame, and over here it's underneath it. So I can't lower the frame down to get the suspension under it or centered or anything. So what I'm going to end up doing is, since this front suspension's got to come apart anyway because it needs ball joints at least, I'm going to pull the coil springs out, unbolt the upper control arms, and swing them like up out of the way. Then the frame can get lowered, swing the upper control arms back into position, and then we can at least mock it up. So some work to do on the Jag before we even start mocking things up. So I'm going to roll it back out, cut most of this away, and do some quick cleanup and some work on the Jag. I'll show you how I take the front springs out of these things as well. All right, so with the main section of the cross member gone, I'm gonna blow out the rest of the rivets on these pieces here. Basically just grind the heads off, knock them out with my special homemade tool. So I'll show you one, and then I'll just do the rest off camera, so you won't be watching that forever. So we'll just do this. So you do that without the, if you don't have a plasma, just grind the head off, use your tool, and there it goes. Knocks it right out of there. So I'm going to do that for probably 6-8 more rivets, and then we'll come back. Okay, frame is cleaned up, at least to get started. So all the cross members gone except for that front section I left there, and there's the pile. It wasn't too bad, just had to cut it up into a lot of pieces to make it easier to handle, to get it out. Taking it out in one piece would have been a real nightmare, but no problem. It's out, it's junk. So next thing will be prep work on the front suspension so we can mock it up. All right, so time to start cleaning up the front suspension. First thing I think I'm gonna do is remove power steering lines, just a couple clamps holding them to the cross member up front. And then I think this is 1/2 inch and 5/8 to disconnect the lines from the rack. So we'll get those done. All right, one of the nuts is stuck to the line here. So I put some power steering fluid on it to try to seep in, but I think I'll just put a little heat on the tube and that should get it freed up. All right, got the power steering lines off. The one nut that was stuck there, had to heat that up, get the line spun off and heat it up, and I got it broken free. So that'll be okay to use for later, because I'd like to save it if I can, because that hose will work with the LS swap. So if we save it, save ourselves 30 bucks or something. So next thing I'm gonna do is remove both motor mounts, just 13 millimeter, 1/2 inch really, bolts, 4 on each side, and they'll come right out. All right, motor mounts are off. I forgot, the 2 bolts closest to the front have welded nuts underneath, so they just spin right out, no big deal. Nuts and bolts on the back. All right, next thing I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna scrape this down a little bit just to give it a quick cleanup. And I think then we'll move to sway bar. Take sway bar off and then take the coil springs out. All right, quick cleanup done on the front end, nothing special, just made it so it wasn't totally disgusting to work with. Next thing I'm gonna do is remove sway bar. Just gonna unbolt the end links here at the bottom, just 9/16. And factory Jaguar actually have a hex stud type, so you can hold the stud with a wrench and get the nuts off. Get the other side, and this is off. There's a look at the Jaguar end links. They have studs on either end. If these break, no big deal, just replace them with, I guess you'd call traditional end links for any car, and they work just fine. One more thing I'm going to do here before I move on to the springs. There's actually a couple things, but I'm going to get a Sawzall and trim the outriggers. You know, it cut them just rough, taking this out of the car. I'm going to trim them back so they look a little nicer and clean them up a bit. All right, with the outriggers trimmed off, next thing I'm going to do is remove the front shocks. Just one bolt at the bottom there, 11/16 nut, 5/8 on the other side. Okay, it's been a few days since I've been out here. Too many other things to do and work and other things going on. But I think where I left off, I was going to remove the shocks, but I can't because somebody put the bolts in backwards. Those lower bolts are supposed to go in from the front so you can remove them. Otherwise, the steering arm is in the way. And what must have happened is, I think when the calipers were replaced, they replaced the shocks at the same time. So they had all that apart and they just weren't thinking. So I can't get those shocks off without removing the calipers. But what I'm going to try to do is, since I have to unbolt the upper control arms and swing the spindle up out of the way to get this thing under the frame, I'm going to see if I can get it then. So coming back to the frame then, I just did a quick measurement on this frame, and it's about 33 3/4 from one end to the other, or 33 3/4, I should say, wide, which is too wide for the Jag if you have these factory rear mounts on. These were the mounting points where the rear were bolted up to the rear of the car, which I say here, I can't speak today. Those are where the rearward subframe or front suspension mounts were on the car. Not going to need them anymore, and because they stick out a little bit off of the tower, they make it a little narrower. I'm going to go 34 inches wide because, like I said, 33 3/4 on the frame, they'll give me a little wiggle room. So I'm going to remove this. It's just basically grind off these welds here and cut this section out, and then put a notch, which looks like that. And that way you have a full 34 inches from inside tower, and it will fit in the frame. All right, so hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I'm having trouble speaking today. Not sure why. But anyway, I'm going to remove this, notch it, measure it, and I should have 34 between the towers. All right, so both sides are notched, cleaned up a little bit, and that's right about 34 now on the inside of those towers in the back there. So it may be a little tight. I may have to grind it out a little bit more, but we're going to find out shortly. So the next thing I have to do is I have to get the upper control arms off, or at least one of them off, because they're too narrow for the frame to fit down over. So unless you're doing like an F1 pickup where it's 32 inches wide and it fits perfectly, you'll probably have to do this. So, but what I'm going to do is, since I'm not going to take the springs out, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to compress the springs and unbolt the upper control arms. And what I have these guys here that I forgot I made. These fit down in here like that. And I can tighten the nut on the bottom and compress the springs, take the stress off the suspension, and then I can unbolt the upper control arm and just remove it. So I'm going to put those guys in, tighten them down, and compress the springs. I think I made these for the Buick. Can't remember. But simple enough. It's just going to let me compress the spring and not have to take it all apart. I think I had the same issue with the Buick, but I'm gonna put a whole lot of grease on these things to keep the threads from galling up forward, because I need to get this under this frame today, at least just sitting in there, because I have to get the gold truck in here on the lift tomorrow morning. So have to make progress today. Tightened up the studs and the nuts there, but they may be in the way of the frame. I'm not sure yet. I tightened them up enough that this piece of 3/4 wood just fits under the bump stops. So that's my gauge, I guess you could say, as far as that goes. But it may not work because it may hit the frame and then I may have to take them back out. But while I have the springs compressed, I'm going to unbolt the upper control arms, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them off or not with the shocks on there. I may have to butcher the shocks. I hate when people put stuff in backwards, but nothing I can do about it now. But I don't need those shocks, so maybe I'll just cut them up. Let's see how it goes. Let's try this. All right, I was probably blocking the camera in the last shot, but anyway. Upper control arm unbolted, but I don't know if I can get it over the shock, even with the shock fully compressed. But look at that. Now I have access to the lower shock bolt. So, I can get that off now. That's cool. So now I can unbolt the shock and put the bolt in the right way. But first, what else we got in the way here? The tire's in the way. Oh man, I can tell it's going to be one of those days already. I hope not. Just feel it. All right. Okay, it is finally time to roll this under the frame and see if I can get it under the frame and see what it looks like. At least that's the plan. Put that up out of the way. Ah, that wasn't good. Oh, I'm telling you, I can tell. I think this is going to be one of those days. I should just walk away for a little while. I just have a feeling. How are we looking? What do we got? Let me see. This frame has some curves to it in the bottom. It may or may not be a problem. We gotta see here. That's just touching the frame. And that's just gonna be this way. All right. This has to rotate up. Not that way. Is that how it's going to be? All right, let's reset and take a look at this. Okay, front suspension is up under the frame. Just as preliminary, I don't know if this is where it's going to be. Once I lower the cab down and get a look at where the wheel is in the fender, we'll know for sure. And I got to change my tires because one of my Jag wheels went flat. It had a bubble on this side and it blew up. So I'll have to swap tires out. But right now, I have the frame level. I've got a jack under the front suspension. The frame is level front to back. Side to side is not perfect, but I'm not worried about that right now. But you see I put the bubble on the tops of the rivets there, and we're there. So the frame is level right now, right? So the reason I'm showing you that is I just want to show you a couple things if you're doing a front suspension. No matter what front suspension you do, notice a couple things. One, upper control arms. See how the front of the upper control arm is higher than the rear. That's what you want, okay? That's anti-dive, and you want the front of the control arm higher than the rear. So if you are putting even a clip, like a subframe in a car or anything you're doing, make sure when you're welding things in, your control arms look like that. You do not want them level. You don't want the front lower than the back. You're going to have crazy handling if that's the case. One other thing also, with the Jag front suspension, let me get my angle finder here. So right now, the frame is level front to back. And I'll drop my angle gauge on there. And let's see where I'm at here. It looks like I'm a couple degrees tilted lower in the rear, which is fine. You can either have this at dead zero with the frame zero, or give it a little extra camber. A few degrees is actually a good idea, and we're at a couple degrees right now in this direction. All right, so with your frame level, you know, weld in your subframe if you can with a little extra camber, a little extra caster, excuse me, in it, and that'll actually help with the handling. The way the Jaguars adjust caster is not with shims up here, like on, say, a Chevy front end, like a Camaro or something. There's shims here, but that's just for camber. Caster is actually shims that you'll see when I clean all the grease off the ball joint. There's actually shims that go between the ball joint and these upper sections of the arm, and you move the ball joint forward or rearward to adjust the caster. And there's limited adjustment there. So I usually set them at max caster, and I try to give myself a little extra on the cross member there. It just helps with handling. But right now I have the front end in place. It's centered side to side. It's even front to back. I'm not sure if it's in the right place as far as the wheel location and fender. That we're going to figure out next. But we are moving along. But I'm taking a break. I need lunch, and we'll come back after that. All right, so front end is now lifted up into the frame. I ground all the paint off the cross member around areas where it might be welded. It's centered. It's side to side's good. Front to back is good. Again, I don't know if this is where it's going to be, but it is now time to lower the cab down and hang a fender and get an idea of what it's going to look like. Frame is not in the right spot. Let's see. Cab is mounted for the first time in I don't know how many years, because it wasn't mounted when I bought the truck. I actually found almost all of the hardware inside the truck, but I'm missing the underneath part of the rear mount. So good thing I bought new stuff anyway, but it is bolted down. I ended up putting the suspension 1 inch forward of original. I think that will work out the best. And I have a fender kind of loosely hung on here. Let's see if I can get a picture here. It's going to be hard to see in here. It really is. But it started pouring rain, so I was going to bring it outside and try to mock it up, but with all the rain, I'm just going to leave it. But I believe that is going to work, and that's where the wheel will be in the fender. Pretty close to that anyway. So I'm just going to throw a couple tack welds on it. All cleaned up. Man, I'll have to get this thing outside. It's tough when you have no room to work. There's quite the rake on this thing right now. I think that gave about at least a 5-inch drop. Just putting the Jag suspension in there. This was, I marked it. When this was in here with the stock front axle, the top of this frame rail was 23 inches off the ground. It is now at, call it 15 and a half. 15 and 3/4 maybe. So what are we talking here? Even if it was 16, that's 7 inches, 7-inch drop. But I do have this spring compressed to get it closer to ride height. So take a couple inches off, I guess. So it's going to be at least a 5-inch drop, 5 to 6 inches lower than stock with the suspension on there. As it is. One thing I am going to have to do with this frame that I've never had to do on any of them before is I'm going to have to put like a divot in the frame here. Just kind of curve it under because the upper control arm is right into it on both sides. And it's because the frame rails are so tall. Most of the trucks I've done this on have didn't have this high of a frame rail. So, yeah. So, still lots of welding to do to finish this up. I just tacked it in the corners on the inside and the outside back there to hold it. I'm going to end up cutting holes in this lower frame section here. And it's already kind of curved, but I'm going to heat it and knock it down and plug weld it into the cross member and weld it all along the seams. Same thing on the outside, be welding the seams and around the perimeter. But that'll be once it gets up in the air. So, this is a good point. I have to get this truck out of here so I can get the gold one in and get it on the lift. So I'm going to roll this out. But this is a good point, I think, to end this one. Sorry if this is a real short video. I don't know how long it's going to be. I imagine it's going to be short, but trying to get a little done each time I come out here doesn't make for very long videos. But work will get done. We're going to get back on this. Maybe tomorrow I can get some more time on it. I said I got to work on the gold truck for a little while and get some stuff off of that. I want to get this... while it's outside, I'll put the fender on outside and get a picture of it or a video of it with the fender on. You can see where this wheel sits in the wheel opening, and it's 1 inch forward than stock. And then it'll be lots of finish welding, get that in place, and then move on to the rear suspension. If I didn't mention, this truck, I'm going to build it and then I'm going to blow it apart because I want to paint the frame and everything on it. So all the fabrication work's going to get done. Engine, transmission, driveline, all the mounts, all the fabrication. Get all that stuff done. And then take the cab back off, take everything back off, paint the chassis, rebuild the front end as needed, deal with the brakes and all that after the frame's painted. But, you know, make a decent truck. We're still on that $5,000 budget. I think we're going to do it. But I'm way early to say that because in my head, I've been thinking of different ways to do things. And, you know, sometimes you just have to spend a few bucks because it's just the nicer way to do it. So I think that'll be it for this one. So thank you very much for subscribing. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for watching. I hope this motivates you. If you get something done every day or every weekend or every month, just a little bit here and there, it will get done. So come back, continue on this, and see you then.